Hello and welcome to Trying Times. My name is Carmen and I'm your host slash friend slash creative who is behind the show that allows me to come here and chat with you about pretty much anything. How cool is that? I think it's really cool. I enjoy it. So if you're new here, then you get an extra welcome. And if you've listened before, well then I love you. Thank you so much for coming back. And I hope either way you're able to unwind and enjoy the episode. And if you haven't already, be sure to follow and rate this show because one, that way you won't miss any new episodes, and two, it shows me that you're enjoying the show. And honestly, that's just really nice to know. I've also been adding this fun thing into each episode lately where you can vote on a poll to answer a question that's related to subject matter for whatever episode it is that you're listening to, well, at least some of the recent ones. And I'm sorry to anyone who doesn't listen on Spotify because that's where you can take part in that. But yeah, it's just something that's really fun to do and to be part of, and it's fun to see your guys' answers and feel like we're chatting in real time. So if you're a Spotify user, then be sure to look out for that. Every time I release a new episode, the poll will be live for at least 1 week at a time, so that gives you guys quite a bit of time to come in and vote and to share your opinion on whatever it may be that I'm asking. So for this episode, I wanted to focus on something that I've briefly talked about before, but a little bit more in depth. I want to get into the whole concept of comparison and the ways that this now primarily functions in our world. I think at some point in life, we all deal with the struggle of comparison, and it's kind of always just occurring. It doesn't really matter what age you're at or where you may be at in your life, because somehow the grass is always greener on the other side. And I don't want to pop that bubble for you, but there are such great chances that the grass truly isn't all that much greener on the other side. There's a pretty big chance that it's just as green as it is wherever you are right now. And I just think in a simple glance, it can always feel like someone has something or is doing something that makes you think, damn, why am I not doing that? Or why haven't I thought of that? And that could kind of go on for a while, to be honest. And truth be told, you probably aren't in that position because it just wasn't meant for you. Or if it's something that you heavily desire and are working towards, then it wasn't meant for you at a specific standpoint in time. It just might come to you a little bit later. I sort of sound like a fortune teller in a way or something right now. Like my hands hovering over a crystal ball and just being like, so in the near future, you will cross paths with X, Y, and Z. But it's true. And sort of back to what I said about this occurring at any age. It's all true. It could be when you're a child and you're on a playground and see someone who maybe seems fearless on monkey bars or something, I don't know. And maybe that other person is just doing their thing. And you think to yourself, I want to try that. Why can't I just do that? Or fast forward to high school. You could see someone excelling with grades and whatever else. And again, just think, why can't I just do that? And even further in time, you could be in your 30s and see colleagues around you either totally doing just whatever they want with all the confidence, or see someone or maybe a few people expanding their family and home life and think, well, crap, why aren't I doing that? And just like I said before, sometimes things just come to some at a time that they're meant to. This doesn't mean that you can't do whatever you want. It just means that you may have to think about it a bit more, consider it, and then decide from there. And whatever you decide, do that to your heart's fullest content. I don't think you need to owe anything to anyone else. I think knowing that is really one of the best ways to achieve whatever you desire. I don't think it's necessarily the only way, but I do think it's the best way to embark on setting a goal and trying to achieve that. So that's one angle of comparison as we know it at its best, just through everyday living and kind of at any stage of time or any stage of your life. And don't get me wrong, I think at some points in time, comparison can be productive, but in many ways, it's actually just a stagnant thing that halts people or catapults them forward. So it can be this incredibly reactive thing, as you can tell, and I'm sure as you can feel sometimes. And I truly believe that how you handle it should be sort of delicate. Or, I mean, if you want, you could just sort of kick it in the ass completely and do whatever you want. But again, that is easier said than done. I know that. I'm sure you know that. Whoever else, it's a very easy thing to kind of know. It's always easier said than done. But there's a much bigger side to comparison that I see as very problematic because without any ripples, it's managed to work its way into our everyday lives and does very successfully at that too. So through this ready-made availability that we now live in with social media, it's become so easy to compare yourself to someone else. And at this point, it's become just as easy to compare yourself to someone else or your work or your life to anything as it is to breathing, I think, in some ways. And that's simultaneously so funny as a concept, but also really terrifying because it shouldn't have to be that easy. That kind of a thought being planted or that seed being planted only to like bloom to kind of make you ask more questions that may not be productive. It shouldn't be that easy, I don't think, but alas it is. So here we are in 2022, just trying our best. And I want to say that I'm incredibly guilty of spending a lot more time than I'd like to admit on social media. So I'm a culprit in this too. I grew up with some of the very start of this wave of new age media that I kind of talk about in a different episode. So if you want to check that out, go ahead and go a few episodes back in time to listen to my little rant about that. But because of that, I find myself thinking pretty often about how crappy I would have felt growing up in this day and age, especially about myself, where filters are as easy to come across as grass or air or water, for that fact, to be honest. It's kind of crazy because, yes, these can be fun and just cool overall to use sometimes, but I feel like they create a degree of standards or unrealistic expectations in appearance, and then that just sort of creates this new threshold. So when I came across social media in my teenage years, it was this thing of post everything online. Post about what song you're listening to, or a picture of you and your friends at a park or something. And it was always just about like life updates, not necessarily serious life updates or, you know, something that's like, oh my God, this just happened, or oh my God, I'm so excited, like this is gonna happen now. But more so just this like very easy update thing, like I'm doing this now, oh, gonna go eat this, gonna go to this restaurant, oh, about to go watch this movie. And so I feel like that's where we were at for a long time. And then that later on became a little more tailored as people began to level up the content that they wanted to share. So quickly, with the rise of influencer culture, things like photo shoots, no matter how big or small, by the way, became a new norm. So long gone were the days of just sharing whatever you wanted. It needed to be curated with care and consideration and, you know, make sure everything kind of matches, but maybe doesn't match. You want it to look like it flows, but maybe not too much. Like it was, and still is, I think, very much something that is a work in progress and it's ever changing. And so I think from that alone, you can kind of see how in that way people's expectations might have begun to change to also want to create something of that caliber, but in their own way. Again, I was also heavily impacted by this and can fully admit that. And I think I'm getting back into just kind of sharing a happy amount of what I want now. And I honestly enjoy that far more. And I'm learning to enjoy that far more again because it shouldn't have to feel like this pressure all the time. I just think it becomes so easy to see things online and having that line sort of blur from reality to online, it becomes second nature to transfer expectations you form and live through online into your reality, if that makes sense. I think that's why with a thing like filters, I purposely pointed out because it's very much a second nature thing now. And we've utilized filters for photos so much before because it was simple and added a bit of like just something different to our own perspective that may appeal to others too. So before it was kind of just like, you know, maybe if a picture looks a little bit like blown out with exposure, I could put this filter over it and maybe it warms it up a little bit and it looks a little bit more appealing. But with the unlimited amounts of applications and editing platforms and these ever-changing expectations, you can now change every single thing about a picture. And I think the scariest thing about all that is how, in a way, I imagine for some people to not feel as though it's enough to edit a photo. And then that furthermore reflects onto themselves in some way, shape, or form. And then again, impacts them in a severe way. And it just goes so far. Like, there's not necessarily an end in sight when you really sit down and think about it in that way. Ultimately, I think you should do whatever it is that you need or want to feel confident and happy with yourself and truly in your skin. If that's something that you need to do, then I guess, you know, that's what matters. But ultimately, at the end of the day, you should feel happy and comfortable and confident in yourself because that is ultimately the most important thing, I think. In addition to that, if something like editing your photos is what makes you happy, then that's okay. But along with that, I just want to say that you should be mindful and always remember to be kind to yourself, because that still takes the front seat to any aesthetic or filter or whatever, online persona that you could work hard to create. Do that if you want to, but just remember to be kind to yourself and don't place these unlimited and ever-changing expectations on yourself so deep within that it's affecting you and you're not able to feel happy about yourself, because that should not ever dictate who you are as a person. And again, with all that being said, I know it is much easier said than done. I don't think I necessarily have any hacks or tips necessarily on how to avoid this strain or stress in your life, because I think that's something everyone's just trying to learn, to be honest. I think all I could say is that you got to do whatever it is you feel you need to or is calling to you, so long as that doesn't harm anyone or anything. That's a really big thing. So do what makes you feel whole and content. If that's following a trend that's everywhere right now, then so be it. If that's deleting socials altogether and being more present with yourself, then so be it. Which, by the way, that's something I would love to try, but I've just not built up the courage to do yet, because it's like that scrolling thing is almost a habit. And so I know that's probably a really lame excuse, but I am trying very hard to get used to departing from that a little bit and not focusing so heavily on it, because it doesn't really do anything to add to my quality of life, in all honesty, when I really sit there and think about it. So that's something I'm trying to be a little bit better with, is just being more present with myself and not being so present on apps prior to being present with myself. All in all, there's no right or wrong way. I think that's just what makes a thing like comparison within the world of social media so much more intense, because you're consistently plugged into everyone's lives. And I mean, that's not healthy. A lot of us, a lot of the time at the end of the day, need a moment to kind of shut off and just be with ourselves. And I think with something like social media, we utilize it to avoid that time, because we don't want to be sat alone with thoughts, or we don't want to be sat alone in silence, because silence can feel daunting for a lot of people. And I understand that so well. But I mean, when you think about it, we're just plugged into so many people's lives all the time that it's just like, where are we putting our own? You know what I mean? Again, I think for some people that's a necessity, and there's no rights or wrongs here. So if that's what you need, then that's fine. But just remember to also be able to place yourself first, because you matter. I think to finally wrap this episode up, I want to ask you if you've ever felt the need to curate content to be more aesthetically pleasing, or even edit a photo in a way that would be more on trend. And you don't have to answer that if you don't want to. You could just ponder that question and, reflect on that yourself. Or if you're listening to this on Spotify, go ahead and vote on the poll beneath this episode. That'd be really cool. I'd love to hear your opinion. And furthermore, if you want to answer and chat, then feel free to DM me on Instagram at the Trying Times Podcast, or leave me a voicemail by clicking the link in the description of this episode. I won't share that voicemail unless you mention in there that you'd like for it to be shared. So that's all good there. Just know it's just a conversation between you and me. And again, thank you so much for listening and being here. This has been so good. If you want to keep up with the show, then be sure to follow it wherever you listen so that you don't miss any upcoming episodes. We'll chat soon again, okay? Bye.